Jake Morrison sat alone at the long metal table in the center of the huge room. The table was empty except for a small pile of papers and a glass of water that had gone warm hours ago. Around him, hundreds of alien beings filled the chamber with their strange sounds. Some clicked like insects, others made musical tones, and a few spoke in languages that sounded like wind through trees. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 12 years. Before him, other humans had sat in this same chair for 25 more years. 37 years total of trying to be accepted as equals in the galaxy. The Galactic Council was made up of 49 different alien species. They came from planets across the galaxy, some so different from Earth that humans needed special suits just to visit them. Each species had a voice in the council. Each species was treated with respect. Except for humans. The current speaker was a tall creature made of what looked like living crystal. His name was Zethkar, and he came from a world where his people grew like plants but thought like machines. His voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke about humanity. The humans continue to show us why they cannot be trusted with full membership, Zethkar said. His crystal body flashed different colors as he talked. Look at their recent actions in the Kepler sector. Yes, they were defending themselves, but they used too much force. They always use too much force. Jake had heard this before. Every time humans defended themselves, it was called too violent. Every time they tried to help other species, it was called interfering. Every time they shared their technology, it was called showing off. Behind Jake, Dr. Lisa Parker leaned forward. She was Earth's top expert on alien biology and had spent 15 years studying the different species in the council. They're about to vote on Resolution 847C, she whispered. Jake's hands tightened on the table. Resolution 847C would place all human colonies under direct council control. It would make humanity a protectorate like a child that needed adult supervision. It was the worst insult yet in a long series of insults. The vote is called, announced Zethkar. All in favor of Resolution 847C? Jake watched as 47 hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages rose into the air. Only 3 beings voted against it. The Altarians, who looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin, had always been friendly. The Free Traders Union, a group of merchants from different species, valued human business too much to insult them, but it was not enough. The chamber filled with the sounds of approval from the different species. Some clapped like humans, others made clicking sounds, and a few sang in harmony. They were celebrating humanity's defeat. Jake stood up slowly. He was not a tall man, but he had the kind of presence that made people listen when he spoke. The chamber began to quiet down as aliens noticed the human ambassador rising from his chair. The United Earth government formally withdraws from all council proceedings, effective immediately, Jake said. His voice was calm but carried across the entire chamber. We will honor our existing trade agreements and diplomatic treaties, but we will no longer participate in this body's deliberations. The silence was complete. Even the species that normally made constant background noises went quiet. Zethkar's crystal form flickered rapidly, which Jake had learned meant confusion or surprise. Ambassador Morrison, Zethkar said, surely you understand that isolation serves no one's interests. Jake began gathering his papers. He moved slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone could see what he was doing. You're right, Speaker. It doesn't serve anyone's interests. But neither does being treated like children by parents who've forgotten what it means to grow up. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. At the door, he paused and turned back. When you're ready to treat us as equals, you know where to find us. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss. Dr. Parker caught up with him in the corridor outside. Jake, are you sure about this? 37 years of work, 37 years of being treated like we're not good enough, Jake replied. Lisa, do you know what humans have done for this galaxy in those 37 years? Lisa walked beside him as they headed toward the human embassy. We've saved 3 species from extinction. We've helped end 2 wars. We've shared our medical technology, our engineering, our art and music. We've given them everything they asked for. And what did we get in return? Jake asked. Lectures about how violent we are. Complaints about how we do things wrong. And, now they want to put us under their control like we're some kind of dangerous pets. They reached the embassy, a small building compared to the massive structures that house the other species' representatives. Jake went straight to his office and activated the secure communication system. "Get me President Jensen," he told the operator. While he waited for the connection, Jake looked out his window at the council city. It was beautiful in its own way, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like plants and transportation systems that moved through the air like schools of fish. Humans had helped build some of those systems. Human engineers had solved problems that had stumped alien scientists for decades, but they were still not considered equals. The communication screen flickered to life, showing President Carol Jensen in her office on Earth. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Jake," she said, "I take it the vote didn't go our way." 47-3, Jake replied. "They want to put us under direct council oversight." President Jensen was quiet for a moment. "And your response?" "I withdrew us from the council." "Completely. No more participation in their debates, no more trying to prove ourselves worthy." "We're done." "Good," Jensen said, surprising him. "I was hoping you'd have the courage to make that call. We'd been preparing for this possibility for years." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Preparing how?" "Operation Homecoming," Jensen explained. "We're bringing everyone back. Every human in council space, every base, every research station. We're pulling out completely. What about our allies?" "The Altarians have been good to us. We'll maintain direct relationships with species that want to work with us," Jensen said. "But we're done trying to prove ourselves to the council. If, they want to treat us like children, they can see how well they do without us." Jake nodded slowly. "How long do we have?" 6 months. Captain Rodriguez is already coordinating the withdrawal. Every human facility in council space will be evacuated and shut down. We're taking our technology, our people, and our goodwill with us. After the call ended, Jake sat in his office for a long time. Through his window, he could see the council building where he had just walked away from 37. Years of human effort. Dr. Parker knocked on his door. "Jake, the council is sending representatives. They want to talk." "Tell them I'm busy packing," Jake said. "And Lisa?" "Start gathering all our research. Everything we've shared with them. Everything we've learned about them." "We're taking it all home. Are we making a mistake?" Lisa asked. Jake looked at her and smiled for the first time in hours. "Lisa, we've spent 37 years trying to prove we belong in their club. Maybe it's time we started our own." 3 days later, the first human transport ships began arriving at council stations. The evacuation was swift and efficient, planned by military minds that had hoped they would never need to use these contingency plans. As Jake boarded the last transport from the council homeworld, he looked back at the building where he had spent so many years fighting for recognition. The alien representatives had come to see him off, some of them clearly worried about what humanity's absence might mean, but it was too late for worry. The humans were going home. The galaxy was about to learn what it was like without them. Captain Steve Rodriguez stood at the observation deck of Starbase Omega and watched the last human transport ship disappear into the bright flash of hyperspace. The massive space station had been his home for 8 years, and now it felt like a tomb. Starbase Omega was huge, big enough to hold 50,000 people comfortably. It had been built as a joint project between humans and 6 different alien species. Human engineers had designed the power systems, human doctors had set up the medical facilities, and human diplomats had negotiated the agreements that made it all possible. Now it was empty except for the computers and robots that humans had left behind to keep it running. "That's the last of them, sir," said Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. She was a small woman with red hair who had been Rodriguez's second in command for 3 years. "All human personnel have been evacuated from council space." Rodriguez nodded, but didn't turn away from the window. He could still see the transport ship's energy trail fading in the distance. "How many people total?" 237,000, Amy replied. From 42 different stations, bases, and colonies. The largest evacuation in human history. And how long did it take? 5 months and 12 days. Rodriguez finally turned away from the window. 5 months to undo 37 years of work. It seemed impossible, but they had done it. Every human in council space was now heading home or already there. The evacuation had been planned for years, just in case something like this happened. The military called it Operation Homecoming, and it was one of the most complex logistical operations ever attempted. They had to move not just people, but equipment, supplies, research data, and even some of the buildings themselves. Sir, Amy said, we're getting a lot of communications from alien species. The Altarians want to know if we'll reconsider. The Zelani are asking about their trade agreements. The Morduk want to know if we'll still help them with their territorial disputes. Rodriguez walked to his desk and sat down heavily. Tell them we'll honor existing treaties and trade agreements, but all new negotiations go through Earth directly. No more council involvement. What the council didn't understand was that humanity's withdrawal was more than just political anger. They had taken their knowledge with them, their trade networks, their military protection, and most importantly, their willingness to help solve problems. For 37 years, humans had been the galaxy's fixers. When two species couldn't agree on something, they called in human mediators. When a planet faced a natural disaster, human relief ships were usually the first to arrive. When a new species was discovered, human diplomats were the ones who figured out how to talk to them without causing offense. Now all of that was gone. On Earth, President Carol Jensen sat in her office reading reports from the evacuation. The numbers were staggering. Humans had been involved in the galaxy's economy and politics far more than most people realized. Are we sure about this? Asked Secretary of State Ryan Webb. He was a tall man with gray hair who had been working on alien relations for 20 years. We're giving up a lot of influence. Jensen looked up from her papers. Ryan, influence that depends on being treated like children isn't really influence at all. It's just being used. But the economic impact will be significant, Jensen agreed. For them, we've run the numbers. The council species depend on human trade and technology far more than we depend on theirs. They're about to learn that. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the busy streets of New Geneva, where the United Earth government had its headquarters. For the first time in decades, Earth felt like home again instead of just a base of operations. We've been so focused on proving ourselves to aliens that we forgot to take care of ourselves, Jensen said. Maybe it's time we remembered what humans can do when we're not trying to impress anyone. Secretary Webb looked at his tablet. The Altarians have sent another message. They want to maintain direct diplomatic relations outside the council framework. Good, Jensen said. They were always decent to us. Set up a meeting. What about the others? The ones who voted to put us under council oversight? Jensen's voice was cold. They made their choice. Now they can live with it. Meanwhile, on the neutral trading station, Haven Point, Dr. Nathan Clark was having coffee with his old colleague, Dr. Maria Santos. Both of them had worked for the Human Diplomatic Corps for years before the withdrawal. Now they were independent consultants, helping species navigate the complex world of interstellar relations. Have you seen the news from the Kepler sector? Maria asked. She was a woman in her 40s with dark hair and tired eyes. The mining dispute is getting worse. Nathan nodded. The hegemony and the free traders are both claiming the same asteroid belt. Without human mediators, they're just shouting at each other. We handled 3 similar disputes last year alone, Maria said. Made it look easy. That's because we actually listened to both sides instead of just lecturing them about proper behavior, Nathan replied. The council's idea of mediation is to tell everyone to calm down and follow the rules. Maria laughed, but there was no humor in it. The rules that were written by the council species for their own benefit. On the view screen in the corner of the coffee shop, a news report was showing images of protests on several council worlds. The headline read, "Trade disruptions continue as human withdrawal affects commerce." They're starting to feel it, Nathan observed. The economic impact is just the beginning, Maria said. Wait until they try to handle their first real crisis without us, she was right. Within weeks of the human withdrawal, problems began appearing throughout council space. The Morduck and Zelani, two species that had been at war for centuries, before humans helped them make peace, started having border disputes again. The council's diplomatic corps tried to mediate, but they didn't understand the cultural differences that made the two species distrust each other. A plague broke out on Zephyria Prime, a disease that affected the planet's silicon-based life forms. The council's medical experts were baffled because most of their medicine was designed for carbon-based life. Human doctors had developed treatments for silicon-based diseases years ago, but that knowledge was now back on Earth. 3 new species were discovered in the Outer Rim, and the council's first contact teams managed to offend 2 of them within days. The third species, a warrior culture called the Vrak, decided that the council's polite diplomatic messages were signs of weakness and began attacking. Council Outpost. Admiral Beth Curtis, formerly of the Earth Fleet, now worked as a security consultant for Independent Worlds. She watched the reports of Vrak attacks with professional interest. They're using standard council fleet tactics, she told her staff. Lots of big ships moving in predictable patterns. No creativity, no adaptation. How would you handle it? Asked her aide, Commander Paul Grant. Hit and run, Curtis replied immediately. The Vrak are warriors, but they're not strategists. They expect direct confrontation. Instead, you hit their supply lines, disrupt their communications, make them chase you around until they get frustrated and make mistakes. Think the council will figure that out? Curtis shook her head. The council thinks warfare is about having the biggest ships and the most firepower. They never learn that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to not fight at all. Back on Earth, President Jensen was reading reports from intelligence services about the growing chaos in council space. The situation was developing faster than anyone had predicted. How long before they asked for help? She asked her advisors. At their current rate of problems accumulating, replied Intelligence Director Karen Walsh. I'd say 2 years maximum. Maybe less if something really serious happens. And when they do ask, Jensen smiled, we'll consider it, on our terms. The human withdrawal was complete, but its effects were just beginning. For the first time in decades, humanity was free to pursue its own interests without worrying about council approval. New colonies were being established in previously unexplored regions. Trade agreements were being negotiated directly with species that wanted human goods and services. Most importantly, humans were rediscovering what they could accomplish. When they weren't constantly trying to prove themselves to others, the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to solve problems without the species that had quietly become its most essential troubleshooters. The lesson would be harder than anyone expected. 2 years after the humans left, Council Mediator Vexnari stood in the emergency session hall looking at a room full of angry aliens. The elegant chamber that had once hosted calm discussions now echoed with shouting, clicking, and the harmonic wails of distressed species. Vexnari was one of the few council members who had consistently argued for treating humans as equals. She came from a species called the Kethmori, tall beings with 4 arms and skin that changed color with their emotions. Right now, her skin was a deep purple, which meant she was very worried. The Morduck-Solani peace treaty has collapsed, she announced to the chamber. Fighting has broken out along their shared border. 17 colonies have been evacuated, and both sides are mobilizing their full military forces. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives from both species began shouting accusations at each other in their own languages. The Morduck sounded like angry bears, while the Zelani made high-pitched whistling sounds that hurt the ears of most other species. Order! Order! Shouted Speaker Kethelin, who had replaced Zethkar after the human withdrawal disaster. What caused the treaty to fail? Vexnaria's skin shifted to a darker purple. A mining dispute on the border world of Kappa 7, the Morduck claim. The humans promised them exclusive mining rights before they left. The Zelani say the humans made the same promise to them. But that's impossible, said Counselor Euthara. A floating, jellyfish-like being from the water world of Aquatica. The humans were always careful about such agreements. The humans are no longer here to clarify what they meant, Vexnari replied. Both sides have different copies of the agreement, and both copies seem to be genuine. Without human mediators to explain the context, neither side trusts the other's interpretation. This was the pattern that had been repeating across council space for 2 years. Agreements that had seemed clear when humans were available to explain them became sources of conflict when the species involved had to interpret them alone. What else? Asked Speaker Kefalin, though his tone suggested he didn't want to hear the answer. The hegemony has blockaded 3 Altarian shipping lanes, Vexnari continued. They claim the Altarians are violating trade regulations, but the Altarians say the regulations don't apply to routes established before the current trade code. And the Kepler mining dispute has expanded into a 3-way war. The original 2 parties have been joined by the Stellar Consortium, who claim salvage rights to ships destroyed in the fighting. Medical crisis? The Zephyrian plague has spread to 4 additional worlds. Our medical teams don't have the expertise to treat silicon-based diseases. The plague is killing thousands daily. Speaker Kefalin, a tall insect-like being with compound eyes, made a clicking sound that his species used to express frustration. Have we tried to contact the human authorities? Multiple times, Vexnari replied. Ambassador Helen Cross has. Been polite but firm? Humanity will not intervene in council space conflicts. They've offered to sell medical supplies for the Zephyrian crisis, but only at standard commercial rates and with no guarantee of effectiveness without human doctors to administer them. What about the new species contact situations? Vexnari's skin turned almost black. The Vrak have declared war on the Council. They've destroyed 6 outposts and are advancing toward the core worlds. Our military commanders say they don't understand Vrak tactics and strategy. And the other 2 new species? The Yulani have withdrawn from contact completely after our representatives accidentally insulted their religious beliefs. The Nexari have allied with the Vrak after we failed to understand their honor-based culture. The chamber fell silent. Even the most arrogant council members were beginning to understand the scope of the disaster. Dr. Nathan Clark sat in his office on Haven Station, watching the news reports from council space. His former colleague Dr. Maria Santos was reviewing similar reports on her tablet. It's worse than we predicted, Maria said. The council is completely falling apart. Nathan nodded. They never understood that diplomacy isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding people, or in this case, understanding species. The Vrak situation is particularly bad, Maria observed. They're a warrior culture. They respect strength and honor. The Council's approach of sending strongly worded messages just makes them think the Council is weak. What would you do? Nathan asked. Single combat, Maria replied immediately. Challenge their war leader to personal combat. If you win, you earn their respect. If you lose honorably, you still earn their respect. Either way, you can start real negotiations. Think the Council will figure that out? The Council thinks. Violence is always wrong, Nathan said. They'll never understand that sometimes you have to fight to earn the right to make peace. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Jensen was meeting with her cabinet to discuss the reports from council space. The situation was developing faster than anyone had expected. They're asking for help again, reported Secretary of State Webb. This time they're offering to pay for medical assistance with the Zephyrian plague. At commercial rates, Jensen replied. No special treatment, no emergency priority. They want our help? They can pay for it like any other customer? Some people are saying we should help anyway, said Defense Secretary Carol Martinez. The plague is killing innocent people. Jensen looked at her steadily. Carol, how many times did we offer free medical assistance to council worlds before the withdrawal? How many times did they accept our help and then vote to restrict our activities because we were interfering in their internal affairs? 17 times, Webb replied, reading from his notes. And every time they complained that we were being too forward or trying to show off our superior technology. Now they want that same technology, Jensen said. They can have it. At market prices, with standard delivery times, and with no special consideration for their emergency. What about the Vrak situation? Asked Martinez. If they break through Council defenses, they might threaten independent worlds. Then we'll deal with them ourselves, Jensen replied. But we won't save the Council from the consequences of their own diplomatic failures. The truth was that humanity had learned a lot from watching the Council's attempts to handle the various crises. The Vrak, for example, had sent messages to Earth shortly after declaring war on the Council. The messages were formal challenges, written in the style of ancient warrior cultures. Colonel Jack Murphy, Earth's military attaché, had responded in kind, acknowledging the Vrak as honorable warriors and explaining that humanity was not part of the Council and therefore not part of the conflict. The Vrak had accepted this explanation and even expressed interest in future relations with humanity. It's all about respect, Murphy explained to the president. The Vrak don't want to conquer the galaxy. They want to be recognized as equals. The Council treated them like barbarians, so they're responding like barbarians. Could we mediate between them and the Council? Jensen asked. We could, Murphy replied. But it would require the Council to admit they made mistakes and treat the Vrak as equals. Are they ready for that? The answer came 3 days later when the Council sent another message to Earth. This time, it wasn't a request for help. It was a demand that humanity fulfill its moral obligations to the galaxy by intervening in the various crises. Ambassador Helen Cross read the message twice before recording her response. The United Earth government recognizes no moral obligations to the Galactic Council, she said to the recording device. We offered partnership and were rejected. We offered our expertise and were dismissed. We offered our friendship and were insulted. The Council made it clear that they didn't want or need human involvement in galactic affairs. We're simply respecting their wishes. The message was sent back to Council space with a copy to every independent world and neutral trading station in the galaxy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of species that had been quietly dissatisfied with Council leadership began reaching out to Earth directly. They wanted trade agreements, defense pacts, and diplomatic relations that bypassed the Council entirely. The galaxy was beginning to realize that the Council wasn't the only option for interstellar cooperation. And humanity, free from the need to prove themselves to dismissive overlords, was ready to build something better. 5 years after the human withdrawal, the galaxy was burning. Emergency Speaker Kethelin stood in the Council's Crisis Command Center, staring at the massive display screen that showed the current state of Council space. Red zones marked active conflicts, yellow zones showed areas of civil unrest, and orange zones indicated regions affected by the various ongoing crises. There was very little green left on the map. Report, he ordered, his compound eyes reflecting the flashing warning. Lights. Admiral Zorthak, the Council's military commander, stepped forward. He was a large, bear-like creature from a heavy gravity world, and even he looked tired. The Kepler sector war has expanded again. 6 species are now actively fighting, and the conflict zone covers 47 star systems. Casualties? Military losses are approaching 2 million. Civilian casualties are estimated at 15 million and climbing. Kethelin antennae drooped. The Zephyrian plague? 12 worlds now infected. Death toll has passed 25 million. Our medical team still cannot develop an effective treatment for silicon-based life forms. And the Vrak? Admiral Zorthaka's fur darkened, which was his species' way of showing distress. They've taken 37 Council worlds and are advancing on 3 more. Our forces cannot match their tactical flexibility. They fight like ... Like humans, finished Dr. Yexmari, the Council's head of xenopsychology. She was a small, blue-skinned being with large eyes that seemed to see everything. The Vrak have studied human military tactics and adapted them to their own culture. How is that possible? Kethelin demanded. Humans published most of their military history and tactical manuals, Dr. Yexmari explained. They were proud of their strategic thinking and wanted to share it. The Vrak learned from it. But it was the latest crisis that had finally broken the Council's resolve. 3 days ago, long-range sensors had detected something that made every previous problem seem small? Tell me about the Omega crisis, Kefalin said quietly. Chief Scientist Nulvarin, a floating energy being from the Photonic Collective, pulsed with distressed colors. A rogue black hole has broken free from the ancient containment system in the Omega Nebula. It's consuming star systems at an increasing rate. How many systems lost? 17 so far. At current acceleration, it will reach the core worlds within 8 years. Can we stop it? Nulvarin's energy field dimmed. The technology exists, but it requires precise coordination of exotic matter manipulation, gravitational field generators, and quantum containment fields. The mathematics alone are beyond most of our scientists. Most? The humans developed similar technology 20 years ago when they contained a smaller black hole in the Tau Ceti system. They published the theoretical papers, but the practical application requires experience we don't have. Kefalin was quiet for a long moment. What are our options? We could evacuate the core worlds, Admiral Zorthak suggested. Relocate the entire council to the outer rim. And abandon billions of people? Dr. Yexmari asked. The evacuation ships alone would take decades to build. We could try to build the containment system ourselves, Nulvarin offered. But without human expertise, the chance of success is less than 12%. Failure would likely make the situation worse. Or, Kefalin asked, though he already knew the answer, we ask the humans for help, Dr. Yexmari said quietly. The room fell silent. For 5 years, the Council had been too proud to admit they needed human assistance. They had convinced themselves that the chaos in their space was temporary, that they could solve their problems given enough time. Now time had run out. Open a priority channel to Earth, Kefalin ordered. The transmission took 3 days to reach Earth through the quantum communication network. The response came 2 days later, and it was from President Yenzin herself. Her image appeared on the main screen, and Kefalin was surprised to see how much she had aged. The human leader looked tired but determined. Speaker Kefalin, she said. Formally, I understand you have a situation that requires our assistance. The Omega crisis threatens to destroy much of the galaxy, Kefalin replied. We need human expertise to contain the rogue black hole. Yenzin nodded. Our scientists have been monitoring the situation. We're willing to help. Relief flooded through Kefalin. Thank you, President Yenzin. What are your terms? Full partnership. In the solution, Yenzin replied without hesitation. Human ships, human scientists, human engineers working alongside Council personnel, full access to all relevant data and facilities, and full recognition of human equality in any future galactic government. Done, Kefalin said immediately. I'm not finished, Yenzin continued. We also want full voting rights in the Council, equal representation in all decisions, and a formal apology for the treatment humanity received over the past 42 years. Kefalin's antennae twitched. The terms were harsh, but with 17 star systems already consumed and billions of lives at stake, he had no choice. Agreed, he said. Yenzin smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. I'll need that agreement ratified by a full council vote within 72 hours. Until then, our ships will remain in human space. The debate that followed was the most heated in council history. Some species still insisted that giving humans equal status was too high a price. Others pointed out that there might not be a galaxy left if they didn't act quickly. The vote was closer than anyone expected, 26 in favor, 23 against. Barely enough to pass, the message was sent to Earth immediately. Yenzin's response came back within hours. Thank you for your offer, she said. But we're no longer interested in council membership. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had voted in favor of the agreement shouted in outrage. Those who had voted against looked smug until the implications sank in. What do you mean? Kefalin transmitted back. Yenzin's second message was even more devastating. We appreciate the offer of partnership, but we found that the galaxy is much more peaceful from our perspective. We're no longer interested in joining the Council under any terms. But the Omega crisis, Tathalan began, will be solved by us in our own way, according to our own priorities, Jensen finished. We will save the inhabited systems that are in immediate danger. We will contain the black hole before it reaches the core worlds. But we will do it as an independent action, not as council members. The price will be negotiated separately, with each species that wants our protection. The Altarians, who have been our friends, will receive our full assistance at no cost. Others will pay according to their past relationship with humanity. Dr. Nathan Clark, now serving as an independent mediator on Haven Station, watched the news reports with his old colleague Maria Santos. They actually thought we'd come crawling back, Maria said, shaking her head. After 5 years of chaos, they offer us exactly what we asked for 42 years ago, and they're surprised we're not interested anymore. Nathan laughed. 5 years ago, we wanted to be part of their club. Now we've built our own club, and it's better than theirs. The irony is perfect, Maria observed. They spent decades telling us we weren't good enough to be equals. Now we're too good to want equality with them. On Earth, President Jensen was meeting with her advisors about the response to the Council's offer. Are we really going to let them face the Omega crisis alone? Asked Secretary Webb. No, Jensen replied. We're going to solve it ourselves, on our terms, for our friends and allies. The Council members who voted to treat us as equals will receive our full protection. The ones who voted against it will pay market rates for our services. And the black hole will be contained using human technology, human ships, and human expertise. We'll save the galaxy, but we'll do it as humans, not as junior partners in someone else's organization. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes offering too little too late was worse than offering nothing at all. 10 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, Ambassador Helen Cross stood on the observation deck of the ESS Liberty, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's newest deep space colony. The massive structure sparkled against the stars like a jewel. Home to 500,000 humans and their alien allies, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Omega crisis had been solved, but not by the Council. Human ships had arrived in the disaster zone with technology that made the Council's best efforts look primitive. They had contained the rogue black hole in 6 months, saving billions of lives and hundreds of worlds, but they had done it selectively. The Altarians, who had always treated humans with respect, received full protection at no cost. Their worlds were saved first, their people evacuated to safety, their star systems reinforced with the best human technology. The Free Traders Union, who had voted for human equality, found their ships protected by human escorts and their stations defended by human weapons. Species that had consistently voted against humanity found themselves presented with bills. Enormous bills. The cost of saving their worlds from the black hole was calculated down to the last credit, including fees for emergency response, hazard pay for human crews, and premium charges for life or death situations. Some species paid. Others tried to negotiate. A few declared that they would rather face the black hole than pay extortion to humans. The humans had simply marked those systems as non-priority and focused their efforts. Elsewhere, 17 systems had been consumed by the black hole before it was finally contained. 15 of those systems belonged to species that had refused to pay for human assistance. The lesson was harsh and unmistakable. The humans would save the galaxy, but only for those who treated them with respect. Captain Lucas Gray, Helen's aide, approached with a tablet full of reports. Ma'am, we're receiving another request from the Council. They want to discuss a formal treaty between the Council and the Independent Worlds Alliance. Helen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Independent Worlds Alliance was humanity's answer to the Galactic Council. It included Earth, the Altarian Republic, the Free Traders Union, and 37 other species that had chosen to work with humanity as equals rather than subjects. The alliance was everything the Council had claimed to be but never was. A true partnership of equals. where each species contributed according to their strengths and received protection according to their needs. Tell them we'll consider it, Helen said. Our terms are simple: equal partnership, equal voice, equal respect. The same terms we offered them 47 years ago. They're asking for emergency assistance with the Vrak situation, Gray continued. Apparently, the Vrak have conquered half of Council space and are demanding tribute from the remaining worlds. Helen nodded. The Vrak situation was entirely predictable. The warrior species had continued their expansion, facing little resistance from Council forces that still didn't understand how to fight an adaptive enemy. Meanwhile, the Vrak had sent respectful messages to the Alliance acknowledging human military prowess and requesting formal diplomatic relations. They had even offered to serve as mercenaries for Alliance members who needed military assistance. It was the difference between treating someone as an equal and treating them as a barbarian. What about the plague situation? Helen asked. The Zephyrian plague has been contained, Gray replied, but only in Alliance space. Human medical teams developed a cure 18 months ago, but the Council worlds haven't been able to afford the licensing fees. And the Kepler sector war? Ended last month when all participants ran out of money to buy weapons. The Alliance mediated a peace settlement that gave everyone access to the resources they were fighting over. Helen turned away from the window where the new colony gleamed in the starlight. The irony was perfect. Humanity had become more influential in galactic affairs than ever before, but now they exercised that influence on their own terms, species. That wanted human technology, human protection, or human mediation had to approach them as equals and pay fair prices for services rendered. The days of humans providing free assistance to ungrateful aliens were over. Any word from Earth about the Council's treaty proposal? Helen asked. President Martinez says we're not interested in rejoining a failing organization, Gray replied. She's more interested in expanding the Alliance. President Elena Martinez was Jensen's successor, a former admiral who understood the value of strength and diplomacy. Under her leadership, humanity had abandoned any pretense of wanting Council approval. On the Council homeworld, Emergency Speaker Kethelin sat in his office reviewing reports that got worse every day. The Galactic Council was dying. Half their member species had left to join the Independent Worlds Alliance or form their own alliances. The remaining members were focused more on their own survival than on galactic cooperation. The Council's authority was ignored by most of the galaxy. How many requests for human assistance did we receive this week? He asked his aide. 47, replied Councillor Vexnari, who had been promoted after most of the senior leadership resigned in disgrace. Medical assistance, military protection, disaster relief, trade negotiations, and first contact mediation. And the humans' response? The same as always. They'll provide services at standard commercial rates to any species that recognizes alliance. Authority and pays in advance. Kethelin S. antennae drooped. What about our offer to join the alliance as equals? They said they'd consider it, Vexnari replied. But they want us to dissolve the Council first and apply for membership individually. Individual membership? Each species would have to apply separately and be judged on their own merits. Species that consistently voted against human equality would face higher membership fees and probationary periods. Kethelin was quiet for a moment. They want us to admit that the Council was a failure. The Council was a failure, Vexnari said bluntly. We treated the most helpful species in the galaxy like children, and now they've grown up and don't need us anymore. On Haven Station, Dr. Nathan Clark was having dinner with a mixed group of friends from different species. The restaurant was owned by a human, staffed by Altarians, and served food from 12 different worlds. It was exactly the kind of place that could only exist in Alliance space. Did you see the news about the Yulani? Asked Dr. Maria Santos. They've formally apologized to humanity for their withdrawal from First Contact. I heard, Nathan replied. They want to restart negotiations under Alliance protocols. Smart move, said Captain Beth Curtis, the former Earth Fleet Admiral who now ran security for the outer colonies. The Alliance First Contact protocols actually work because they were designed by people who understood cultural sensitivity. Unlike the Council's approach of lecturing everyone about proper behavior, added Commander Paul Grant. The conversation was interrupted by a news bulletin on the restaurant's view screen. The anchor, a human woman, was reporting on the latest developments in Council space. The Galactic Council today announced the suspension of operations in 12-star systems due to lack of resources, she said. This brings the total number of systems abandoned by the Council to 43. Most of these systems have already applied for Alliance membership or protection. Think they'll survive? Asked Maria. As what? Nathan replied. A few core worlds with delusions of grandeur? Maybe as a galactic government, they're finished. What? About the species that are still loyal to them? They'll learn, Beth said confidently. When your choice is between Alliance membership and being conquered by the Vrak, most people make the smart choice. The truth was that the galaxy had moved on without the Council. Trade flowed through Alliance networks that were faster, fairer, and more efficient. Disputes were resolved by Alliance mediators who actually understood the cultures involved. New species were contacted by Alliance diplomats who treated them with respect from the first meeting. Most importantly, the Alliance had something the Council never did: the trust and cooperation of its members. Ambassador Cross finished her tour of the new colony and returned to her ship. As the Liberty prepared to depart for Earth, she looked back at the bustling space station, where humans and aliens worked together as equals. This was what the galaxy could have looked like 47 years ago if the Council had been willing to treat humanity as partners instead of subjects, but they had made their choice, and now they were living with the consequences. The humans had walked away, and the Council's remorse had come too late. The galaxy would never be the same.